Somewhere along the way, you started treating your own nature like a rough draft that needed approval before it could be seen. And that kind of habit does not begin because you are vain, weak, or confused. It begins because being yourself once felt risky. Maybe it made someone uncomfortable. Maybe it invited criticism. Maybe it made love feel uncertain. So you learned a quiet little trick. You adjusted, you softened, you anticipated, you translated yourself into a version that seemed easier for other people to accept. And because that strategy helped you survive certain rooms, certain relationships, certain seasons, you carried it into places where it was no longer serving you. Now you sit with this tired feeling you cannot always explain. You overthink simple conversations. You replay your tone. You wonder whether you asked for too much, felt too much, wanted too much. You become deeply skilled at locating your own supposed flaws. You call it self-awareness. You call it growth. You call it maturity. But beneath all those respectable words, there is often a more painful truth. You are still trying to earn the right to be unguarded. That is exhausting. It is exhausting to keep editing yourself in real time. It is exhausting to scan someone's face while you are speaking and decide, mid-sentence, whether your honesty needs to be reduced. It is exhausting to offer kindness that is sincere, then secretly hope it will purchase safety. It is exhausting to confuse being easy to handle with being worthy of love. And here is the deeper ache. Even when people praise the version of you that performs so beautifully, some part of you still feels lonely. Because the part being praised is often the part that learned how to disappear without leaving the room. The agreeable version, the low-maintenance version, the wise one, the understanding one, the strong one, the one who knows how to swallow hurt without making it inconvenient for anyone else. So let me say something clearly. The pain you feel is not proof that you are broken. Very often, it is proof that you have been at war with yourself for approval. That changes everything. Because if the problem is not your nature, then your life does not need more self-rejection dressed up as improvement. It needs a different kind of healing. Not the healing that asks, how do I become more acceptable? But the healing that asks, what did I have to deny in order to feel safe, and what would it mean to welcome it back? That is the paradox at the heart of this conversation. You may have spent years trying to fix yourself for others when the real wound was never your essence. The real wound was the belief that your essence needed editing in the first place. And I know that lands deeply because so many people have built an identity around self-correction. You become the one who always reflects, always improves, always adapts. You become so responsible for everyone's comfort that the idea of simply being yourself can feel almost reckless, like leaving the house without armor, like forgetting something important, like stepping into the world without first apologizing for taking up space. But sweetheart, being whole is not the same thing as being polished. Being lovable is not the same thing as being easy. And being kind does not require making yourself smaller than the truth of who you are. Most people who constantly try to fix themselves are not actually obsessed with becoming better. They are trying to prevent pain. They are trying to avoid abandonment, conflict, shame, rejection, misunderstanding. They are trying to control the emotional weather around them by becoming endlessly adjustable. If I say it the right way, maybe I will still be loved. If I stay calm enough, useful enough, forgiving enough, attractive enough, light enough, spiritual enough, then maybe nothing hard will happen. Maybe nobody will leave. Maybe I will finally be safe. Now stay with me here because this matters. That pattern did not appear out of nowhere. Psychologically, people often learn self-monitoring early. When acceptance feels inconsistent, the nervous system starts paying close attention to what keeps connection intact. A child does not usually think, I am entering a developmental adaptation shaped by emotional unpredictability. A child thinks, I should be easier. That is how these habits begin, not as vanity, not as manipulation, as survival, as intelligence, as a brilliant attempt to preserve belonging. And later, because the strategy once worked, you keep using it long after the original environment has changed. You become an adult who can sense discomfort before anyone speaks. You become highly skilled at reading tone, posture, silence, the tiny shifts in energy that suggests someone is displeased. You may even call yourself intuitive, and perhaps you are. But sometimes what feels like intuition is an old vigilance wearing beautiful clothes. There is also something spiritual woven into this. Many people confuse self-sacrifice with love. They confuse self-erasure with compassion. They believe that being evolved means having no needs, no edges, no preferences, no honest no. They think peace means never disrupting anyone else's comfort. But that is not peace. That is fear made polite. Real peace has spine. Real love does not ask you to amputate your truth to prove your goodness. And here is what most people miss. When you live in constant self-correction, you do not just lose energy, you lose signal. You stop knowing what you actually feel before you translate it. You stop noticing what your body says before your personality steps in to manage the moment. You stop trusting your own reactions because you have trained yourself to ask first, how will this affect everyone else? And after years of that, it can become very difficult to tell the difference between your actual self and your adaptation. That is why this work is not about becoming more confident in the performative sense. It is about becoming more honest in a way your body can recognize. It is about remembering the difference between harmony and self-abandonment, between generosity and self-betrayal, between growth and endless self-editing. So I want to offer you a simple framework, not a productivity system, not a perfect routine, just a gentle way back to yourself. I call it the soft return. The soft return has 3 steps: notice, loosen, stay. Notice is the moment you catch yourself turning your humanity into a problem. It is when you hear the old reflex say, that feeling is too much, that need is inconvenient, that boundary is unkind. that truth will make you harder to love. Notice does not argue yet. It simply sees, it turns on the light, because you cannot change a pattern you are still calling your personality. Loosen is the next step. Once you see the old habit, you soften your grip on it. You do not attack yourself for having it. You do not create a second performance around being healed correctly. You loosen. You let there be a tiny bit more space between the trigger and the automatic self-correction. That space may be only a breath long. It still matters. In that breath, another choice becomes possible. Stay is the final step. This is where you remain with your own truth, gently and steadily, without rushing to smooth it over for someone else's comfort. Stay might mean letting your no remain a no. It might mean resisting the urge to over-explain. It might mean allowing a pause after you say what you really feel instead of scrambling to make it prettier. Stay is not aggression. It is not rigidity. It is self-loyalty in a calm voice. The reason I love this framework is that it does not ask you to become a different person. It asks you to stop abandoning the person who is already here. And for many people, that is where everything begins to shift. So what does notice look like in real life? It looks like catching the instant shame after you express a preference. You say where you would like to eat, and 2 seconds later you hear the voice that says, "Actually, anything is fine. I do not want to be difficult." Notice that, not with judgment, with curiosity. There you are, trying to disappear again. It looks like feeling the urge to send a long explanatory text after setting a simple boundary. You say you cannot make it. You say tonight does not work. You say you need more time. And then suddenly you are drafting a thesis statement as if declining one invitation requires a court defense. Notice that. Your nervous system is trying to protect connection by making your no seem harmless. It looks like realizing how often you say sorry when you have done nothing wrong. Sorry for asking, sorry for the delay, sorry for being emotional, sorry for needing clarity, sorry for existing with weather. Notice that sometimes apology becomes a ritual of softening your presence before anyone has even challenged it. And now, loosen. Loosen might mean waiting 5 extra minutes before sending the over-explaining text just to see what happens in your body. Loosen might mean replacing one apology with one honest sentence. "Thank you for waiting. I need a little time. That did not feel good to me." Loosen might mean letting your first answer stand instead of revising it into something more digestible. Small things, very small things, but small things are where trust is rebuilt. Because this is not about becoming blunt or dramatic, it is about becoming congruent, that inner alignment where your words stop fighting your body. And then stay. Stay is often the hardest step, because this is where old fear gets loud. This is where you feel the pull to rescue the moment, make the other person comfortable, hurry in with a joke, an explanation, a reassurance, a self-correction. Stay says, "Not this time." Stay lets the silence be there. Stay lets the truth breathe. Stay does not immediately volunteer to become smaller just because tension has entered the room. Now I know what you might be thinking, but what if people react badly? What if someone thinks I have changed? What if they say I am selfish, cold, difficult, too much? Yes, some people may react, especially the ones who felt very comfortable with the version of you that translated everything into convenience for them. That does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes the first sign of healing is that your old role stops running smoothly, and that can be disorienting. Because when you have spent years being the understandable one, the low-friction one, the one who absorbs discomfort before it spreads, any shift can feel like failure. Your body may interpret self-respect as danger simply because it is unfamiliar. That is important to understand. Familiar is not always healthy. Familiar is just what your system has practiced. This is why the practical part matters so much, not big declarations, not dramatic exits, tiny experiments, gentle repetitions, real-life moments where you teach yourself slowly that authenticity does not equal catastrophe. Here are a few ways to practice. The first is the pause before the polish. The next time you feel the urge to make your truth more acceptable, pause for one breath, just one, before softening your opinion, before adding unnecessary apology, before laughing away what you actually mean. Take a breath and ask, what am I trying to prevent right now? Not, what is the correct thing to say? Not, how do I keep everyone happy? Just, what am I afraid will happen if I remain honest? That question alone can reveal the whole pattern. The second is body honesty. Your mind has likely become very talented at rationalizing self-abandonment. Your body is usually less impressed. So when you leave an interaction, do a tiny check-in. Do you feel expanded or contracted, settled or scrambled, clear or foggy? Did you speak from yourself, or did you perform a version of yourself? The body often tells the truth before the personality catches up. This is not mystical, it is practical. Your body keeps a record of what your mouth tries to smooth over. The third is a simple sentence practice. Choose one clean sentence you can use when the old habit appears. Something like, I need a moment to think, or that does not work for me, or I hear you and I feel differently, or even, I am not going to explain this more right now. These are not harsh sentences, they are grounded sentences. They create room for your real self to exist without performing for immediate approval. And please do not underestimate how uncomfortable this can feel at first. You may do one tiny, honest thing and then spend half the day wondering whether you have become a terrible person. That does not mean you are wrong. It means your inner alarm system is being updated. Also, can we lovingly acknowledge how wildly creative the mind becomes when it is trying to keep an old people-pleasing pattern alive? Suddenly, one unanswered message means the relationship is over. One disappointed face means you have ruined everyone's week. And one boundary means you are now apparently the villain in a very dramatic internal soap opera. The mind really knows how to produce theater on a budget. Humor matters here, because shame hates gentle laughter, not mocking laughter, kind laughter, the kind that says, oh, look at me writing a whole tragedy because I said I was tired and could not come to dinner. That warmth interrupts the spell. It helps you see the pattern without collapsing into it. Another practice is to notice where you confuse kindness with self-erasure. Kindness says, I care about your feelings. Self-erasure, Asher says, your feelings are more valid than my reality. Kindness says, I want to be respectful. Self-erasure says, I must become agreeable at any cost. These two can look similar from the outside, but inside the body they feel very different. One is open, the other is tight. One allows dignity for both people. The other quietly removes yours from the room. You can also begin asking a new question in your relationships. Can I be honest here without managing the entire emotional outcome? That question is powerful, because if the answer is no, then the issue may not be that you are too much. The issue may be that the container only works when you are edited. And that realization can sting, but it can also set you free. Let me say something tenderly. Many people do not actually know the unedited you yet. They know the translated you, the diplomatic you, the one who sensed what was wanted and delivered it before anyone had to ask, the one who made life easier, calmer, smoother. So when you begin speaking more cleanly, resting more honestly, declining more simply, some relationships may need time to adjust, and some may not adjust at all. That is not always loss. Sometimes it is exposure. It reveals which spaces were in relationship with your essence and which spaces were in relationship with your performance. And yes, that can feel lonely for a little while, but it is a clean loneliness, not the crowded loneliness of being surrounded and still unseen. There is dignity in that difference. There is peace in no longer auditioning for belonging. Now here comes the permission moment, and I want you to hear it with your whole body. You are allowed to stop treating yourself like a project built for public approval. You are allowed to stop renovating your personality every time someone misunderstands you. You are allowed to stop assuming that discomfort means you have done something wrong. You are allowed to have needs without defending them into poetry. You are allowed to be kind without becoming endlessly accommodating. You are allowed to be thoughtful without turning self-betrayal into a virtue. You are allowed to rest from the performance of being easy to love. My love, you do not need one more round of self-improvement rooted in fear. You do not need to become shinier, softer, calmer, quieter, more impressive, more spiritual, more agreeable, more digestible, just to deserve tenderness. You do not need to earn the right to take up emotional space by proving that you will never trouble anyone with your humanity. You are not a burden because you feel deeply. You are not broken because you need clarity. You are not hard to love because you cannot thrive in conditions that require your constant self-erasure. And you are not failing at healing because the old habit still appears. Healing is not the absence of the reflex. It is the moment you notice it and choose not to bow to it so quickly. That matters. Even the smallest moment matters. The moment you do not apologize for your face. The moment you say, I need to think about it, instead of instantly saying yes. The moment you realize you are not actually too sensitive. You are simply tired of pretending that certain things do not hurt. The moment you leave a room and tell yourself the truth instead of grading your performance. These moments are holy in their own quiet way. They are how a life changes, not through one grand declaration, but through repeated acts of self-return. And I want to name another truth. Some of your exhaustion has come from being loyal to the wrong task. You thought your job was to keep everyone comfortable enough to keep loving you. That was never your job. Your job is not to maintain connection by disappearing inside it. Your job is to bring your whole self into relationship and let reality reveal what can hold it. That is a harder path in the short term, but it is a gentler life in the long term. Because the alternative is brutal. The alternative is being liked for a version of you that costs too much to maintain. The alternative is spending years becoming more acceptable while feeling less alive. The alternative is receiving approval that never quite nourishes you because some part of you knows it was purchased through adaptation. No wonder you are tired. No wonder so much effort has not brought peace. Peace does not come from perfecting the mask. Peace comes from no longer confusing the mask with your face. And this is where we circle back to the beginning. You were never broken to begin with. Conditioned, perhaps. Protective, yes. Adapted, absolutely. Wounded in certain ways, like every human being, but broken in essence. No, the deepest part of you was never the problem. The deepest part of you has been waiting very patiently for you to stop introducing it as one. There is such relief in that. Because if your essence is not the flaw, then your path forward is not endless correction. It is remembrance. It is returning to what is already true beneath the habit of performance. It is discovering that self-respect can be soft, that boundaries can be warm, that honesty can be gentle, that you can love people without turning yourself into a hallway they walk through on the way to their own comfort. And maybe that is the quiet miracle here. Not that you become fearless, not that you never overthink again, not that every relationship suddenly becomes easy, but that you begin to trust yourself more than the old script. That when the reflex says, fix it, fix yourself, make this smoother, make yourself smaller, another voice rises and says, no, stay here, stay honest, stay kind, stay whole. That voice may tremble at first. Let it tremble. Truth does not need perfect delivery to be true. And the more you practice the soft return, the more natural this becomes. Notice, loosen, stay. Notice the reflex without worshiping it. Loosen the old urgency without punishing yourself for feeling it. Stay with your reality long enough for your nervous system to learn that authenticity is not an emergency. These are small words, but they carry a deep rearrangement. They invite you out of performance and back into presence. There is another place this pattern hides. It shows up before anything is even said. You rehearse, You predict reactions. You shape your words so carefully that by the time you finally speak, the living truth has already been trimmed into something safer. Sometimes that is thoughtfulness. Sometimes it is fear wearing a very respectable outfit. So try this. Before an important conversation, write down what you actually mean in one plain sentence. I felt dismissed. I need more consistency. I cannot do that. I want something different. Then watch how fast the mind tries to decorate it. It adds disclaimers, softeners, little apologies, long explanations, all designed to make your truth easier to swallow. Notice that impulse. It reveals how quickly honesty gets converted into performance. You may also see how often you prepare to be pleasing before anyone has even asked anything of you. You enter a room already adjusting. You become gentle in advance, agreeable in advance, useful in advance. From the outside that can look generous. Inside, it often feels like labor, invisible labor, the labor of making sure no one has enough friction with you to pull love away. That is a painful job to carry for years. And when you begin to put it down, even slightly, grief can rise. Grief for how long you believed goodness required self-erasure. Grief for the parts of you that stayed backstage. Grief for the tenderness you offered others while treating yourself like a draft under revision. Let that grief be honest. It does not mean you are becoming bitter. It means you are finally acknowledging the cost. When the cost becomes clear, your discernment changes. You start noticing which spaces welcome your reality and which only welcome your performance. You notice who can tolerate your honesty and who only relaxes when you are edited. You notice which conversations leave your body settled and which leave you feeling graded. These are important clues. Discernment is not cruelty, it is care. And please hear this too. The answer is not to swing into hardness and call it healing. The answer is not to become cold, unreachable, or perform a new identity called unbothered. That is still performance. The invitation is simpler and more honest than that. Stay warm, stay human, stay open, but stop volunteering your disappearance as proof of love. That is why the soft return matters so much. Notice without shaming yourself. Loosen without demanding a dramatic breakthrough. Stay without using steadiness as a weapon. This work is quiet, but it is powerful. It changes the question you live by. Instead of asking, "How do I manage this well, enough to stay accepted?" you begin asking, "What is true for me here?" Instead of asking, "How do I keep this perfectly smooth?" you begin asking, "What preserves self-respect?" That shift may sound small. It is not small. It changes the source of your life. And learning it often looks ordinary. It may look like leaving a message unanswered until tomorrow because you are tired. It may look like not rescuing a strained atmosphere. It may look like letting someone be mildly disappointed without turning their disappointment into a verdict on your worth. Quiet moments, real moments, the kind that teach your nervous system that authenticity does not destroy connection every single time. A lot of healing is like that. Not cinematic, not dramatic, subtle. It arrives when you realize you no longer need to explain every preference. It arrives when someone reacts and you do not instantly conclude that you are wrong. It arrives when you say less, mean more, and leave the conversation with your dignity still intact. It arrives when peace stops feeling suspicious. Take that peace. You do not need to mistrust calm just because chaos once felt familiar. You do not need to keep earning belonging through emotional labor. You do not need to keep proving that you are safe for everyone if no one is wondering whether you feel safe too. This is where self-respect becomes lived, not just admired. It changes the pace of your replies, the tone of your boundaries, the way you listen to your own body, the kinds of relationships you can actually sustain, because the goal is not universal approval. The goal is to be at home in yourself enough that approval is no longer purchased through betrayal. It changes your energy. When you stop spending so much of your life monitoring yourself for acceptability, energy returns, attention returns, creativity returns, rest returns. Joy becomes more honest, not because life is suddenly perfect, but because less of your life is being spent performing for an invisible panel of judges. That is what opens when you stop treating yourself as the thing that needs fixing. You begin to feel like a person again, not a performance, not an apology, not emotional customer support with a beautiful smile. A person, whole enough to be loved before everyone agrees with you. So the next time you feel the old ache, the old pressure to become more acceptable before you can relax, pause and remember this. Your worth is not waiting on someone else's comfort. Your lovability is not hiding behind a better version of you. Your peace is not on the other side of endless self-correction. It begins the moment you stop calling your original self a mistake. It begins when you tell the truth in one clean sentence. It begins when you let a no remain whole. It begins when you notice your body tighten and choose not to abandon it. It begins when you stop asking, how do I become easier to love? And start asking, what becomes possible when I stop negotiating against myself? That is a different life, a quieter life, a truer life. And you do not have to build it all at once. Just begin with one moment today, one moment where you do not rush to edit yourself for approval, one moment where you let your preference exist, one moment where you speak without pre-shrinking, one moment where you choose self-loyalty over automatic performance. That is enough for now, more than enough. If this landed somewhere tender in you, stay with it, let it settle. Let it interrupt the old story that says love must be earned through self-rejection. And if you want to keep walking in this direction, stay close. There is more here for you. But for now, carry this with you. You were never broken. You were taught to doubt what was whole. And the healing begins when you stop fixing yourself for others and start coming home to the one you already are.